and I'm glad to be affiliated with the Bipartisan Committee. But I really want to get to our panel here because this is, I think, is the most significant, going to be the most significant news since the election. You know, the first take on history is always takes, you know, it takes a little while, and we're going to have to crunch a lot of data, but this is the most data that's going to be made available to the public since Election Day. And the people that have crunched this data are the finest pollsters in the country. I want to talk a little bit about WHIT. Is that Resurgent Republic, which my wife is on the board of, and you start thinking about down the future, you can't think about the future without thinking about WHIT's clients. He represents Marco Rubio, Bob Corker, Lamar Alexander, Lindsey Graham, to name a few. Any kind of thing that is going to be diverting the fiscal cliff or the fiscal slope is going to involve people like that. And you can read WHIT's entire resume in the program. I won't go through that, but I will say without hesitation, equivocation, or reservation that he is truly one of the most respected and sought-after Republican pollsters there are. Stan and I have been at Democracy Corps since 1999. You can also read all of Stan's stuff in the book and all of the campaigns that he's worked on both here and abroad. I will say this about Democracy Corps, is that in 4 cycles we have never been over a point off in our final unweighted number. And according to the now infallible Mr. Nate Silver, we're the #1 ranked national polling firm in the country in terms of our accuracy. So I'll take, you know, maybe as Jack Benny once famously said, I don't deserve this award, but I don't deserve arthritis either, but I'll take the compliment from Mr. Silver in this environment. So I want to take this time to bring up Stan and WHIT, and let's start our panel, and we've got a lot of news that we're coming up here. Before we get started, why don't y'all explain exactly how much data we have, where it's coming from, how it was accumulated, and just give us the sort of background, if you will. We have 2 separate polls. Tell us what we... How many interviews? Something. Tell us something. All right.
We're talking to each other. We weren't paying attention to you. As usual. So what?
Well, first of all, let me say what a pleasure it is to be back at Tulane at the Bipartisan Policy Conference. It was our great pleasure, Stan's and mine, 2 years ago to come here and explain what happened in the 2010 election. You may recall a thumping Republican victory, 65-seat pickup in the U.S. House, independents voting by an overwhelming 18-point margin for Republican candidates, a 36-point turnaround from the last election, non-presidential election, or as the Republicans now call it, the good old days. That was the opportunity for me to gloat a little bit subtly, and for Stan to talk about how the Democrats, yes, had gotten a thumping, but they understood the problems, they understood what they needed to correct them, and they knew how quickly things could change. Well, the shoe's on the other foot now. It's now Stan's opportunity to gloat subtly. The emphasis is on subtle, Stan. To gloat subtly, and for me to talk about what went wrong, what happened, how we can change it, and how quickly it can turn around. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be talking about a poll that Resurgent Republic did, a post-election poll, Tuesday night of the election through Thursday, and we're going to show you a few highlights from it. It's all online at resurgentrepublic.com. And Stan's going to talk about a Democracy Corps survey, or maybe several of them, that he did. So you want to give a little intro here, sir?
Again, I'm pleased to be here. I promise not to gloat. I do remember not enjoying the last time we the last time we did this. But this gathering has become very important, I think, for assessing these political changes. And we've been through now elections in 2006 and 8 and 10 and 12. Each one of them, an upheaval. The next election, the most important one to come, and where it's clearly a period of change, both for the country, economically, politically, And the elections are a manifestation of it, and we're blessed with having the ability to do surveys during the course of these elections and listen to people and reflect what we're finding, but also to do these post-election surveys. In this case, we did a 1,000 sample survey that was asking questions that reflected on what's the bipartisan priorities and opportunity, after the election, and what are people, looking for, but also combining 4,000 interviews from our various surveys to try to look at with more texture about, what swing voters and others, and what role they played in the election. So we're going to try to do that, and I think probably both of us, we're going to present some graphs, but I think we're going to both kind of use our graphs as kind of a backdrop, to say what we think happened, because I think it'll be more interesting to, hear both what Whit has to say and hopefully what I have to say about it.
Sometimes I feel like the best way to win the next election is to lose the last one.
We certainly hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. I don't know if that's the case. Whit, I want to let you start. Mike Tyson famously said after defeating Leon Spinks here in New Orleans in the Superdome that everybody got a plan until you hit him in the mouth. Now that the Republicans all gotten their dental work done, tell us what happened on election day.
I've done a lot of these talks. I assure you will never have an introduction quite like that James Carr will give you. If we could call up the Resurgent Republic survey, and let me just mention that there were a lot of factors that went into this result at the presidential level, and we know some of them. There was a far superior ground game and turnout operation that was run by the Obama campaign. It was an amazing ability to reach down in with technology and identify likely voters, get them to the polls, and get them to the polls early. We need the other presentation if we can call up the other one.
This would be really cool.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what.
I am not going to give you a presentation.
And I'll do yours.
No, I'm not. There was an amazing continuing high turnout of young voters and African Americans. African American voters went from 11% to 15% in Ohio. Almost nobody anticipated the Obama administration would be able to pull that off, or the Obama campaign. We had a slowly improving economy that was just enough to get Barack Obama's job approval up to the point where he could win the election. We'll take a look at that. We had some rather unfortunate comments from some Republican Senate candidates that the Democrats ably and professionally amplified to the entire country, which didn't help the Republican brand. There are a number of things going on here, but I'm going to talk in my few minutes of introduction here briefly with the most important one in my judgment, and that is the dramatic change in the structure of the electorate. Just a few slides here. This is a slide that shows you the percentage of the electorate made up of Democrats in the blue line, Republicans in the red line, and independents in the gray line. This goes all the way back to '84, and what you will see is that Democrats usually have a slight advantage in the electorate of 3-4 points. Occasionally, Republicans can come up and equal Democrats, as they did in 2004 when Bush was reelected at 37-37, and as they did in the election I just mentioned in 2010 at 36-36. But in 2008, Democrats had a 7-point advantage in the electorate, and last Tuesday they had a 6-point advantage of 38-32. That is critically important in a very polarized country, because what that meant was the Democrats had a small, statistically significant advantage of 6 points over Republicans all across the board. There were some Republicans who were hoping, indeed believing, that Republican turnout would equal Democratic turnout. In fact, there was even a little website that arbitrarily decided they would unskew polls so that Republicans did equal Democrats. I always thought that was fanciful. There's no way in the world you're going to know that for sure. But as it turned out, we had an electorate that looked very much like the 2008 electorate, thanks to the Obama campaign's turnout efforts. This is how independents have voted going back for many years, back to '84, for Congress, Republican in red, Democrat in blue. And you will see that frequently independents split fairly evenly. But in the big wave elections, like 1994, you'll see that independents voted for Republicans 55 to 41. Then we had a period where they split equally, where there was very little turnover in Congress. Then in 2006, primarily driven by disgust with the Iraq War, independents voted for Democrats by 18 percentage points, 57-39. And in 2008, they voted for Obama by 8 points, 52-44. Then we see the big wave the other way, reaction against many of the Obama administration's policies, the 56-38 in 2010, which put Republicans back in charge. But independents voted for Mitt Romney this time, 50 to 45. The difference here is that wasn't enough, that 5-point margin wasn't enough to overcome the 6-point Democratic advantage in turnout and in the electorate, which is why President Obama was reelected. Here is the big picture of the American electorate going back to 1976. 88% of the electorate was white, 12% was non-white in 76 and 80. And you'll see that over the course of the next dozen years, that went down by 5 percentage points, 88 down to 83. But look what's happened since 1996. 83, 81, 77, 74, 72% white. This is a downward trend that is going to continue. Every month in America, 50,000 Hispanic youngsters become eligible to vote every month. And that's going to continue for the next 20 years. So that line is going to keep going down. And that's the reality that a party that's primarily dependent on white votes faces, and that the Republican Party is facing today. Presidential election, we know that President Obama got 332 electoral votes, about 51% of the popular vote. Romney got 48%, primarily in the South and the Midwest and the Mountain West. We know that by racial category, Mitt Romney won whites by a landslide. Not just a little bit, by 20 points, 59 to 39. That is a larger percentage of the white vote than any Republican challenger against a Democratic incumbent has had in the history of exit polling. That is more than Ronald Reagan got of the white vote among Jimmy Carter, which tells you something. If we had the same demographics today that we had in 1980, Mitt Romney would have been comfortably elected president, comfortably. The demographics are enough not just to change things at the margins, but to change fundamental electoral outcomes. You'll see blacks almost overwhelmingly voted for Romney, Hispanics 71-27, Asians 70, Obama I said. Yeah, thank you. Dreaming. 71-27 for Obama among Hispanics, 73-26 among Asians. That's amazing. Bob Dole won Asians in 1996. And now we're losing them 73-26. Mitt Romney swept almost every white subgroup, all by huge margins frequently. White women, 56-42. White Catholics, 59-40. Even white young people. A lot of people don't realize this. White young people voted for Romney by 51-44. Almost every category of whites went for Romney. And yet that still was not sufficient to win the election. This is the way Hispanics have voted going back to 1976 between Democrats and Republicans. You will see that Hispanics usually vote substantially for Democrats. But the key number is that 2004 number, where Republicans got 44% of the Hispanic vote. Why? Because George W. Bush tried. He reached out. He was very aggressive at going into Hispanic communities, at advertising on Spanish-language TV and radio. He was very aggressive at trying to get more Hispanic vote, and while he didn't get a majority, he did succeed far beyond what most Republican presidential contenders have done. George W. Bush won a majority of the Hispanic vote in the Sun Belt states. The point of showing you this is to show you that it can change, and it can change rapidly with the right candidate and the right message. And you'll see ever since 2004, things have gone the other way. Immigration reform debate in 2006 was a big part of that. Undecided voters normally break for challengers in incumbent reelection campaigns. And yet in this one, you'll see that the people who decided the last few days went for Obama by 50 to 44. That's really unusual. In 2004, the late deciders, they're always about 10% of the electorate. It's really amazing to think that we can go through an entire campaign and 10% of the electorate can't decide until the last week. But in 2004, they went for Kerry over Bush, 52-44. This breaks the pattern of what we're used to seeing in incumbent reelection campaigns. Did the way President Obama handled Hurricane Sandy and its aftermath make you more likely to vote for Obama, less likely to vote for Obama, or did it have no real effect on your vote? These are the people who decided the last week. More likely 15, less likely 6. It seems small. Most people said no difference. But when you're talking about a very narrow election, having a 9-point difference between more likely and less likely among late deciders talking about Sandy suggests that it did have a modestly positive effect for President Obama. Obama job approval, well, we talk a lot about how one of the best predictors of a vote is the job approval of the incumbent. Look at this, 51-47 approve, disapprove in the electorate that turned out, and what percentage of the vote did he get? 51. But look at the partisan difference. This is a bipartisan conference. Republicans, 6 approve, 94 disapprove. Democrats, 94 approve, 3 disapprove. Measured by the difference in approval between Republicans and Democrats, Barack Obama is the most divisive president we've had in the history of exit polling, even more so than his predecessor. And that's a challenge that this conference and many of the people involved in politics are going to have to face going forward. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Barack Obama is handling the economy? An almost even split on the most important issue. Again, the 49% approve was awfully close to the ballot that he got. Finally, for the Republicans in the audience who are discouraged and down today, let me just suggest this is still, even with the electorate that turned out on Tuesday, a center-right country. Which of the following comes closer to your view? Government should do more to solve problems and help meet the needs of people. Government is doing too many things better left to individuals and businesses. Too many things has a slight lead overall, but look at the independents. By 53-40, they think government is doing too many things better left to individuals and businesses. Here's a question we like to posit, to put up against a fairness argument, an opportunity argument. Government policy should promote fairness by narrowing the gap between rich and poor, making the rich pay their fair share, and reducing income inequality. Or government policy should promote opportunity by fostering job growth, encouraging entrepreneurs, and allowing hardworking people to keep more of what they earn. If you define it that way, by a double-digit margin, people prefer the opportunity message over the fairness message, and independents prefer it by 20 points, 57-37. And finally, all this talk about Paul Ryan was going to be a huge drag on the ticket because Medicare was going to push seniors and others toward the Democrats. Every bit of evidence that we can see suggests that the Republicans won the Medicare argument, and white seniors voted overwhelmingly for Mitt Romney. Paul Ryan has proposed making significant reforms to Medicare. His Medicare plan would preserve and protect this program, saving us trillions of dollars over the long run and keeping Medicare from going bankrupt while giving seniors more choices and control over their own health care. Or Paul Ryan's plan would end Medicare as we know it, leaving senior citizens at the mercy of greedy insurance companies and forcing them to pay for part of their own health insurance, which could lead to cuts in life-saving medical treatment. If you look at it that way, the Ryan plan wins by 52-35 overall, by 50-34 among independents, and even a third of the Democrats basically buy that language to preserve and protect Medicare. So it was a long night for Republicans. We've got a pretty good handle on a number of the things that went wrong. The best news, as far as a silver lining for Republicans go, is that the inexorable march of demographic change, which many of us have been talking about for years, gets a much more favorable hearing now than it did before Tuesday. Let me pass the baton